Hello, thank you for choosing to watch this video. This is number 12 in the What If Fantasy Box Art Model Kit series. Thunderbirds is a British television program made in 1965 by Gerry Anderson. The futuristic stories involve International Rescue, a privately owned secret organization dedicated to saving those in danger. Former astronaut and multimillionaire Jeff Tracy oversees the operation, with each of his 5 sons assigned a unique Thunderbird craft with its own speciality. The premise and weekly stories are unlike virtually any other TV show. The series was produced in super marionation, where characters are portrayed by sophisticated marionettes and exterior scenes are conveyed with elaborate models. The hardware of the show is fantastic. The artificial world allows for 100% believability, especially when you're 10 years old. The show is perfectly set up to have a range of model kits made. So if there was one model kit or kits that I wish had been made when I was growing up, it would have been decent scale models of the 5 Thunderbirds. I was unaware of any model kits of Thunderbirds until the late 80s when I came across a kit of Thunderbird 2. I think it was the IMI Big Thunderbird 2 kit, which I came across in a comic book store in Camden Town in London. And I kind of couldn't believe my eyes. It was like, oh my God, a model kit of Thunderbird 2! And they had some other things in there as well, some Captain Scarlet stuff. So I kind of basically grabbed up everything they had. And these kits, they weren't terribly accurate. They have firing missiles and sort of wheels and other sort of like toy-like gimmicks. And they have sort of no detail. They're not really to any set scale. I think the Thunderbird 2, there was nothing in the pod. I think it was just hollow, even though it did have a door that opened. You know, they were kits of the Thunderbirds, but like I said, this was until the late 80s. And there was, I think, round about that same time, there was a vac form kit by Comic Miniatures of Thunderbird 1. Vac form plastic, some white metal, some injection molded plastic, and that was pretty good, but it took a lot of work to deal with that. And since then, there have been some excellent scale model kits produced in the last sort of 15 to 20 years. Thunderbird 1, sort of in 1/4/4 scale, quickly followed by Thunderbird 2 in 3/50th, Thunderbird 3, Thunderbird 4, Fireflash, the Mole, and the Recovery Vehicle in 72nd. Really, really great kits. But again, that was, 15, 20 years ago. There was nothing growing up. So when I was watching Thunderbirds, for the first time as repeats in the 1970s, I just would have been great. It would have been fab if there had been model kits of these things. In prior videos, I've done a couple of the background or less featured or less hero aircraft and vehicles, but I think now it's about time that we just jump in. All right. Thunderbird 1. I've done this in 1/72nd scale, which would make it about 15 inches long. It's 90 feet tall in real life, according to Jeff Tracy. The original filming model that you see in the launch sequence, I think, is about this size. Thunderbird 1, super fast rocket plane. It features swing wings and retractable landing gear, which in a kit you would have to do as optional parts. I don't really think there's a way that they really probably fold down. It was sleight of hand in the way the show was filmed and edited. Optional parts for both the wheeled and the more common sort of skid versions of the landing gear. And it also carried sort of a variety of specialized equipment featuring in the different stories. So you'd have to get all those in the kit. This would be an all singing, all dancing kit. So you'd get the nose-mounted cannon, the remote TV camera that comes out of a hatch at the top of the fuselage. There's a harpoon launcher that it uses, a sonar buoy that's deployed. So you'd have all that, and I think obviously you'd have a detailed cockpit, and all the hatches would open. It'd be great to get a version of Scott's mobile control and the hover bike, and obviously figure of Scott Tracy, maybe one in the pilot seat and one at mobile control if you wanted to do it that way. So all of this will be included in the kit, along with the various bays where these things are deployed from, and the hatches and alternate parts where needed. I wanted to create a picture of Thunderbird 1 sort of at a rescue site where it's probably something it could handle itself. Scott's experience and expertise could orchestrate the existing emergency services without having to call on Thunderbird 2. So yeah, I just wanted to do a picture of really featuring Thunderbird 1, looking great as it does, of course. A little bit of context here. So Thunderbirds was a very lavish, very ambitious TV series, and they built lots of different models of the star vehicles, and in fact rebuilt some of those models during the course of production, because they were rescuing things and everything was crashing or burning or or both. You'd be having inevitably stock shots, and then you'd have a shot that needed a different size model for whatever the action was. So you'd have all these things cut together, and there would be, there's continuity problems. I really like all the models that appear in the title sequence or in the launch sequences of the various craft. They just seem to be the best looking and, in many ways, sort of the best models, because they had time to do them for those scenes versus, they're in the middle of an episode and had to patch them up, literally. All right, Thunderbird 2. 8 out of 10 viewers said this was their favourite. It's 250 feet long, and it has a wingspan of something like 185 feet. If you imagine a really, really big, round jumbo jet, that's kind of that's kind of what Thunderbird 2's size is. So in 1:4 scale, which is one of the standard scales, this would come in at about 21 inches long. So this would be a big model, which would be a good size. And I think because it is such a big ship, a model of it, going back to the Ashima ones, it's a great model, but it's only about 10 inches long, and there's just something, not quite satisfying about that. You want it to be big, because you want to be able to have all the details sort of represented, but you want it to have a bit of heft to it, So in my dream world, where Airfix made a super kit of Thunderbird 2, because it would be huge and would have a lot of parts in it. So this kit would include detailed cockpit and areas around those sort of windows at the front, optional hatch in the roof. The aircraft carries an assortment of inbuilt permanent sort of rescue equipment, which can be deployed from the bay in the nose. It has sort of like small grabs, magnetic cables fire out, a rescue elevator can be deployed, an electromagnet, even has a cannon at one point. There's an upper hatch as well that conceals a missile launcher and has access for sort of air-to-air transfer. The fuselage has this detachable module in the middle of it, which is called the pod, and there are pods numbered 1 through 6, each containing different rescue equipment. This kit would include detailed pod interior. Maybe that'd be optional parts, because I think they are slightly different inside, but certainly you'd get the optional part of the Thunderbird 4 launch rail that comes out, and you'd get an in-scale Thunderbird 4. You'd also get the magnetic grabs that you see in a couple of episodes, and I think an in-scale version of the mole, just to kind of get you going with some context for the kit. The aircraft has these sort of powerful telescopic legs that kind of lift it up off the pod. Again, I don't think you'd be able to actually produce these to work, but if you've got optional parts, one sort of in the fully extended version where it's standing up in the hangar, clear of all the pods, and then a sort of a slightly lower down version, the way it looks when it's over the pod, and then the up version when it's flying along. It has discrete wheels in the bottom of the pod for when it's taxiing along the runway. Decals for all 6 pods, including some interior for those, because it says like Thunderbird 2, Pod 5, Pod 6, etc. And again, like I said with Thunderbird 1 and with all these models, there are different paint schemes and markings seen at different times in the series, so the decal sheet would ideally include those options. For this box, I just wanted to convey, how big and sleek this thing is. So although there's lots of practical functionality that could be shown or in some ways maybe should be shown on the box to show, wow, look at all this cool stuff it can do. I just wanted to show, what a beautiful aircraft this is. I mean, it's big and it's the heavy rescue thing, but it's really sleek and it's really, really beautiful. So I've kind of, stamped it there on the box. Thunderbird 2, that's it. Could you imagine going into, Beatty's or a model shop or Woolworths and seeing this thing sitting there on the shelf? I imagine, in my dream world, there'd be other pod vehicles that you could get scaled to this. Thunderbird 4 and the Mole you'd get probably included with this kit, but then some of the more memorable vehicles you could get as well. They'd be all about between 3 and 4 inches, probably. The elevator cars that you see in the first episode that race along the runway for the Fireflash to land on top would be great. You could have a couple of optional parts in there for the one that Virgil drives and then the remote version. Likewise, the recovery vehicles that you see, which drag the Sidewinder out of the burning pit in Pit of Peril. The Mole we talked about, you'd be able to get that by itself, so you wouldn't have to spend a gazillion weeks worth of pocket money to get Thunderbird 2. You could also get Thunderbird 4 by itself in this scale, although there will be another kit of that, which we'll get to in a minute. I did the restraining outfit, which is it's a very memorable vehicle. These big suction cups on the front, they use it to hold up a wall of a house that's collapsing. Everywhere you look, if you look online, it's always called the Domo or the Domo 9. even though it has a 6 on the side. In the episode, Scott refers to it as the restraining outfit, that I think is maybe a little bit colloquial, like get the paddy wagon kind of a thing. So that's why I put it in parentheses, the restraining outfit, because it is what it's called in the show. Unlike most things in Thunderbirds or most international rescue vehicles, it doesn't say on it what it is. There was took great care to write on the side what it was. I did these as blister pack, the old award-winning Series 1 packaging from the 70s. Just really exciting to see all the different pod vehicles. Would just be such fun to see these hanging up in the shop. So this brings us on to Thunderbird 3. Thunderbird 3 only appears in maybe a half dozen or so episodes, and only half of those involve a rescue. Other times you see it, transferring personnel between Tracy Island and Thunderbird 5. But it's beautiful. I love Thunderbird 3. They say in one episode that it's 287 feet tall. So in 1/4/4 scale, which is the scale for the Saturn V, it'll be about 24 inches tall, which is a good size. Not as tall as a Saturn V, but I think one of the models they used in the show was about that size. And they had a massive 6-foot tall one that was used in all the scenes in the launch silo. And that has quite a lot of detail on it. So again, I'd have some optional parts where you could put all that sort of piping and those other fiddly bits and pieces that are on that big model that you don't see on the small one, just to kind of give you those options. Because there's not a lot, unlike Thunderbird 1 and 2, there aren't a lot of moving parts or options. I think the most you'd have is some optional parts for there's a hatch in the side when they have to go outside on a spacewalk, and then in the base of it, you'd have the piece which would be the settee with 2 or 3 crew members on it, which could probably be an optional part or a moving part or something, and then with the seated figures, and then probably a couple of figures of astronauts that you could do something with. It would be just nice to have it in scale with Thunderbird 2 and some of the other space stuff. Obviously, it would have to come in bright orange plastic. With this picture, Thunderbird 3, it's just so elegant. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful ship. So I didn't want anything to sort of get in the way of that. And because it doesn't do a whole lot, I sort of like the idea of it just sort of being there in space, sort of in Earth orbit with the Earth behind it. And then Alan sort of out there doing something, inspecting or rescuing somebody. Thunderbird 4, the smallest of the Thunderbird machines, and it's carried in Thunderbird 2 to the danger area. It's 30 feet long, so as a 1/32nd scale kit, it would be 11 inches long, which for anyone who remembers the Jay Rosenthal JR-21 toy from the 60s, I remember having one of these when I was a kid. And that was about the same size. And that was a fantastic toy. It looks just like Thunderbird 4. It's crude in places, but the shape, it's great. It's great looking. So yeah, Thunderbird 4, this would be another kit with a variety of parts. It has a lot of equipment that it deploys from the nose. The light at the front sort of hinges down. And then you have these sort of portals where it has missiles, it has a laser cutter, battering rams, magnets that come out. And then there's a flexible gas line with a drill on the end of it. So a few different things. The lamp beacon would be posable. You'd obviously have an interior cockpit for Gordon. And it'd be great if you got a couple of Gordon figures, one in his scuba uniform and one in his international rescue uniform, and then maybe an optional sort of like swimming Gordon, again, if you wanted to do some sort of posing with it. Thunderbird 4 just looks really, like all the things, they're just such great designs. Again, the Ashima kit of this is really nice, the 1/48 scale one. But again, this is about what I would have loved in the 70s growing up. So yeah, and this picture shows Thunderbird 4 kind of exploring a shipwreck of some sort. And this brings us to Thunderbird 5, which often gets sort of forgotten because it doesn't go anywhere. I think they only ever showed it from like 2 angles in the whole series. But anyway, Thunderbird 5, it's a massive space station. It's equipped with sophisticated scanners and trackers, and it can pick up calls for help from anywhere in the world. There's actually an episode where it picks up some chat between 2 kids playing with those toy radios. Now, anyone who had those know that they had a very limited range. So I really like the fact that it's like, yeah, Thunderbird 5, it's really impressive, especially back then. I mean, nowadays, you can probably do that, maybe. It's massive. It's 400 feet long and 250 feet in diameter. So the round part is 250 feet. And then with Thunderbird 3 docks, that's 400 feet. So in 1/4/4 scale, like the Thunderbird 3, it would be over 3 feet long and sort of 2 feet round, which is a huge kit and huge pieces of plastic. And outside of, there's some windows in it, so you could have an interior You could see through the window and see John in there, and put some, detail inside where Thunderbird 3 docks. But other than that, it would be, sort of big pieces of plastic and would be expensive. So really trying to think about it, I'm like, okay, would they really do that? Probably not. So if it was 1/288th scale, it would come in a sort of 17 inches long, so 1.5 feet, which is a really good size. And Thunderbird 3 in that scale would be 12 inches, which is another pretty decent size. So if you'd want to be able to have Thunderbird 3 dock with Thunderbird 5. So I figured if you get a kit which is Thunderbird 5, including Thunderbird 3, at 1/288th, that would be, the two of them docked together would be 2 feet, which would be really impressive. So, I don't know, it's a tricky one. Do you do a Thunderbird 5 that no one would have ever bought because it would have been too big and too expensive? And God knows how you'd actually display it, because it has that big antenna sticking out the bottom. But some sort of stand or whatever. But anyway, you got to do Thunderbird 5, and I think this would be a nice size to do it in. But I think if you had only one model of Thunderbird 3 and it was 1 foot long, that wouldn't be right. So that's what I came up with here. As I said, you only ever see Thunderbird 5 from a couple of angles. So I did this painting to try and show it off a bit more, show it with Thunderbird 3. And this is actually a reworking. I did a Christmas card with Thunderbird 5 on it. And this painting sort of started out as a reworking of that. I had to paint out all the decorations and stuff. So I ended up repainting pretty much the whole thing. But I thought this was a nice kind of image. So those are the 5 main Thunderbird machines. Something else which is a regular piece of hardware, features in many, many episodes, beloved by fans, is Fab 1, which is the Rolls-Royce, the pink Rolls-Royce, which belonged to Lady Penelope, who was International Rescue's secret agent in London, who would help sort of get to the bottom of some mysteries and help bring people to the proper authorities if there was any nefarious activity. I don't know if in the show this was meant to be like a contemporary Rolls-Royce and she just customized it, or if it was specially designed by brains like all of the other International Rescue stuff. But either way, it's super cool. And in the course of the series, we see it travels at super high speed. It has machine guns hidden behind some of the headlights. There's a high-powered cannon, which is behind the radiator grille. It can fire harpoons throughout the rear. And then it has an oil slick and a smoke screen, sort of countermeasures, and it's bulletproof as well. In later episodes, we see the car traveling on the water. It has these hydrofoils that deploy. So lots of optional parts would be included in the kit, as well as Parker and Penelope. You'd probably have a Penelope passenger and a Penelope driver, because there were a couple of occasions where she did drive the car, so it'd be good to have figures where you could do that. FX did a series of car kits that were 32nd scale, so this would sort of fit right in with that. There was a full-size puppet version of Fab 1, as well as several models, and they looked quite different. I favoured the original Fab 1 model, which is sort of a lower profile and just generally sleeker and a little bit meaner looking than some of the later models, and certainly the puppet versions. That's the one I've kind of gone for here. And in this scene, it's sort of just a classic car chase through sort of picturesque mountains. Not a scene from a particular episode, but something that was part of Lady Penelope's world. They made 2 feature films of Thunderbirds. Thunderbirds Are Go, which featured this giant ship called the Zero X, which went to Mars. And then a couple of years later, they did Thunderbird 6, which involved this futuristic kind of airship. And the rescue involves a 1930s biplane, a Tiger Moth. And sort of the Tracy family honour it at the end of the film, naming it Thunderbird 6. This would just be a regular 72nd scale Tiger Moth kit with unique decals. Maybe you get figures that represented Brains or Alan or Tintin, who will fly the plane at one point. And this just shows the Tiger Moth coming out of the pod, where it's dwarfed. It's just dwarfed by Thunderbird 2. It's a really great scene in the film where you see that kind of scale. And then we come to the Mole, which is probably the most famous of the vehicles carried inside the pod. Features in 3 stories. And again, FX did some 32nd scale fighting vehicles, Monty's Humber, and I think a half-track, and maybe a couple of other things. And also this would put it in the same scale as Thunderbird 4. Quite a tricky one to do as a painting, because how do you illustrate a machine that basically is in 2 parts, which functions underground out of sight? But anyway, I kind of came up with this, which I think reminds people, oh yeah, I remember that from the show. I think this came out pretty well. It's in 2 parts. There's a tractor that drives along to the suitable location, and it then tilts up the cradle to the appropriate sort of burrowing angle, and then the drill, the sort of mole part itself, the drill starts to spin, and there's a rocket motor on the back, which pushes the whole thing forward and down into the ground. underground where the drill sort of starts cutting in and pulls it underground. The mole is 43 feet in length, so this kit would be 16 inches, which is huge. This would be a really big model. But, you know, it could have some moving parts, the elevating trolley, rotating drill bit. And also, although it's never shown directly in the show, there is a sort of doorway in the side of the machines. You'd have that. You'd have an interior kind of cabin as well. Not that you'd be able to see it too well. And I think you'd get figures of Virgil and Scott and a couple of hover bikes in scale with the mole. And I think some of the more memorable e-ticket vehicles would be great in 32nd scale. So look out for those coming soon. So I think that's a lot for one video, so I'll wrap it up there. There is more coming very soon. Thank you very much for watching. If you have questions, comments, anything, please put it in the comments below. Please visit the website. If you want to buy any artwork, please contact me through the website. If you want to commission anything, please contact me. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.